So today's session is hosted by the Amaze Parent Groups and Befriending Service. As I said, I'm the project manager and I'm joined by Zoe Luther today, who's one of our engagement and support workers. So we've got some fabulous speakers lined up for you this morning. So we'll be starting with Sally Kristen, who is our children and young people worker and information advice and guidance worker in our SENDIASS team at Amaze. We've got Christine Towers from Together Matters, Saffron Romero from East Sussex Shared Lives, and we'll be finishing with Kelly McDonald, who's a parent carer and will be sharing her experiences with her daughter Daisy. But I will pass on to Sally Kristen, who will go through some bits about SENDIASS and the what is available, what should happen. So is that okay if I pass over to you, Sally?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to come along and join you. So I just want to explain about the SEND IAS service, often sometimes called SENDIASS service. It stands for the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Information, Advice and Support Service. So this is a different service from the parent groups and befriending service that Marie and Zoe are involved in. And we offer an impartial and confidential service for parents and carers and young people. So we give information to parents and carers and young people about what the law says around education, health and social care and kind of what your options are. We can't give recommendations about specific services or providers, but can help you to know what your options are. And we're sometimes asked if we hold lists of providers, thinking about housing options if we have lists. We don't hold anything. In the slides that you will receive that we're using today, you'll see I've put links to anything that we've been asked about that you can then look on where there are lists of local providers. So to start with, I want to explain a little bit about young people. If you know your young person is going to need support as an adult, and will need support wherever they choose to live, whether that's with you as an adult, whether it's in supported living, whatever their options are, and you know they'll need support from the council, from the social care to do that, then it'll start by having an adult social care assessment. So the next few slides has got information about the Care Act, which is the law, which says what councils, what local authorities have got a duty to do. Now, I'm aware that the slides that I say, some of you may already know this. So please bear with me if you do. There may be some of you who are thinking ahead and want to know more about this, so I hope this will be useful. I'm also aware, as I say this, that myself and my colleagues talk with many parents and carers, and this is not it can be very difficult and it can be challenging to get social care or to access social care or to find this. So, but I want to let you know what the law says so that you know what you can ask for. So an adult social care assessment is needed in order, if you know that your young person will need support with their living as they become an adult. It's for 18-year-olds, so it'll be around the 18th birthday, or if they're older, you can still request one after their.
Yes, his letter states that he has learning difficulties.
They don't need for that. These slides here just say, you know, for an 18-year-old, you don't need a diagnosis, don't need an HCP, don't need to be getting disability benefits, they don't need to be getting support from social care already. There's a useful fact sheet that you can have a look at about that. So this is what the Care Act says must happen. These are the eligibility to who gets support from adult social care. There are 3 steps. So in order, and again, I say this so that you know that is that is the criteria. That's what the law says. These are the 3 steps in order for an adult who's 18 plus to get support from the council social care. So for a young person to be eligible for adult social care or support services, they must have a physical or mental impairment or illness that means they're unable to do at least 2 of the things in this list. So these are called specified outcomes. So if during an assessment, it's, you know, that your young person can't do at least 2 of these things, and they have physical or mental impairment or illness that means they can't do at least 2 of those things, then they have met step 1 and step 2 in the eligibility. And then, step 3, as a result of being unable to do those outcomes, to meet those outcomes on the previous slide, they must also consider whether there is or likely to be a significant impact on the adult's well-being. So that's what the Care Act says must happen. Do have a look, please, if you'd like more information about that. There's the Contact charity's got very helpful information about what the Care Act says. So what does this mean for you? So for some of you, if your young people are already getting support from Children's Disability Service, then there will be an assessment, and it's usually around their 18th birthday. It may be called a child's needs assessment or a transition assessment, and the transition service from either Brighton and Hove or East Sussex will then get in contact with you. If you haven't heard, so if you are nearing the 18th birthday, then you can contact the transition service and say, can we have an assessment? So you can ask for this before their 18th birthday, but they don't have to agree to do an assessment before their 18th birthday. They need to give you the reasons why they're not going to do that. Usually it's around their 18th birthday, and the Care Act is clear in saying that there should be no gap in services. So this slide and the following slide is for those of you whose young people are already getting support from the Children's Disability Service. And I believe these slides will be sent to you, so these have got the contact. If that's you and you want to know more, or you want to find out about the assessment, who to contact for that. If your young person hasn't had any support from social care so far, and they're getting towards their 18th birthday, or maybe they're older, and you're thinking actually they need support, then they're going to need more support. Want to know what support will be available for them, perhaps thinking about where they want to live, choose to live, getting support with their living, then you can ask for an adult social care assessment for them. It's not a sometimes parents and carers are surprised if that actually their young person may be eligible for support where they haven't been. So you can ask for a social care needs assessment, and the links here on this slide give you some information about this and how to do it. In the social care needs assessment, they will consider, used here YP, just because it's a shortened way of saying young person, but they will consider the young person's needs and how they impact on their well-being. Look at the outcomes that matter to the young person, and they look at the young person's circumstances, and they will then consider what the needs of the adult are, and therefore what support they will need as an adult. You also can ask for a carer's assessment as well as part of this. So I hope this is helpful in terms of giving you information about if you're looking for your support with their housing and their living options, and you're wondering how to start, might be worth considering asking for a social care assessment to start. And there's further information on this on our website, our new website. Do have a look on the link here, and also again contact information.
Lovely, thank you, Sally. Really, really helpful to kind of get an overview of social care assessments. And Sally's going to speak a little bit later on about some of the options, the housing options that are available. As you said, these slides will be sent out, so don't worry about jotting down links or anything like that, because we'll get these sent out to you after the talk. And so next we're going to move on to Christine from Together Matters.
Sorry, just having a problem unmuting. Sorry about that. Okay, so I can, okay. So yeah, I'm Christine Towers, and I'm going to be talking about planning for housing in a slightly broader sense. And I always try to probably cover a bit too much when I talk, mainly really because I think different ideas appeal to different or useful to different people. So I feel if I cover a lot of things, then you can pick up the things that are useful for you. But as you're going to get the talk and the slides, you can kind of go back and you know, if you don't quite get the links or pick up what's oh, what was that resource Christine was talking about, you'll have it in the slides. I don't seem to be managing to move on, Marie. In fact, it's gone back, hasn't it, to the first slide?
Yeah. If I move you forward one now, yeah. Try.
Let me. I probably can now, can't I?
Okay. See if that works.
No, that's still not. It's still not moved. Oh,
no, it's moving.
Did you move that?
Yeah, it's moving for me, but not
oh,
you.
Maybe could you just move? I'll just go okay, and if you just move.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, okay. To move on to the next one then. So I'm just going to start by saying briefly about Together Matters. I set up Together Matters about 8 years ago, and really the focus has become more or less completely on planning, really at different times of life. So for young people during adult life and growing older. So the resources I'm going to be talking about, they can be useful, not just at this time of sort of change and people moving on as young people into adult life. They'll go on being useful. So if you get familiar with them, actually, they're a tool that will go on, hopefully helping you to do planning. And I think planning often gets a bit neglected for adults. So it's, you know, if you're familiar with the planning, you can make sure that still continues to happen. Sorry, they just seem to have a mind of their own. That's fine. Well, what I was going to say is we've got a website. We've got lots of free resources on there. All you have to do is fill in a download form, and it's all there. So, you know, families do find the resources very useful. So please do sort of go and have a little look around it, see what's there that's what's there that's useful. I mean, we do workshops, we do training to sort of use the resources and things like that. We have a newsletter. I'm not very good at getting that written, to be very honest, but we also, you know, I love hearing from families about how they use things and then sharing that. The stories I've learned a lot from working with families and hearing their stories, and then go on and share that with other families. So, you know, so I always love to hear from people about how they've got on with things. So what I'm going to talk today about is ideas and tools to plan ahead for housing. So firstly, I'm going to talk about planning more broadly before focusing on a place to live. And what I've found with doing workshops around the Thinking Ahead guides is that sometimes families will say, oh, we'd love a workshop on housing. And it's almost like diving in at the deep end, I think. And what we've learned, and I often do workshops with other parents, and they feel the same. It's really good to do other bits of planning and get sort of information, get confident about doing that before sort of broaching housing, because housing is actually one of the biggest decisions we all make in our life, where we live. So, you know, most of us just don't leap in and think, I'm going to move. We actually do lots of thinking about why we want to move, where we want to move to, what do we want to get from moving, and things like that. So, I mean, hopefully this sort of perspective will help with thinking about that and actually make moving, or thinking about, you know, a place for your young person to live much easier, because it's not that sort of jumping off a cliff quite so much, because you've done a lot of the thinking. Then I'm just going to talk about some of our resources and how they're helpful for thinking more specifically about a place to live. And then I've got a few tips from families and a few other resources I've put in there, just in case you don't know about them, so that you can use them. And I think, again, a message that I found families find really helpful is, and this is, I mean, I think this is in general, but specifically around housing, I think what often happens is either someone is asked at a review meeting, do you want to leave home? And I just think, you know, it's such a big question. And or families feel, you know, we want to explore this, and they go in a review meeting, whatever they ask, what's available. And actually, I think it's like taking this step back, not going with that approach. And I think this is true of asking for any support, but you know, do your preparation first. Think of what you want as a family. Think what's really important to my young person, and then you go feeling much more confident and able to shape the discussion. I mean, you need things from statutory services. They have information, and you know, they understand the system to help you. But if you have what you want to gain from that, and you'll kind of really feel more confident about that, then it's just really helpful. So I think that kind of message will sort of, hopefully that will come across in what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay. Whoop. Oh, all right. Yes, so the 3 resources I'm going to be talking about, as I say, these are all free to download. So there's Thinking Ahead, a planning guide for families, and it is actually over 10 years old now, so it's been around a long time, tried and tested, and there's lots in there that families have found helpful. Then there's I'm Thinking Ahead, that's an easy read guide. It was written a few years after Thinking Ahead. It kind of followed on naturally from Thinking Ahead. I thought, you know, we need a resource that really helps young people and adults being involved in conversations. And actually, I'm Thinking Ahead is often a go-to for families in a starting place. I'm going to talk more in detail about these. And then there's Shaping My Future. So that was just came out last year, but I wrote that for Essex County Council. So although it's Essex, so much of the information is general, and it's written for people with physical disabilities. So that's who it's talking to, people living with a physical disability. But there's lots of information in there for families, and I've been encouraging families to use it. And actually obviously my learning from Thinking Ahead went into Shaping My Future. So lots of the topics are the same, but there's more up-to-date information. So that's really useful. And also, I suppose the things I've learned from Thinking Ahead, I've kind of, you know, put a perspective that into Shaping My Future. So it probably is a bit of a case of dipping into different resources and getting the bits that are useful to you, because there's obviously an awful lot of information there, and you don't, you know, necessarily need to use it all at all, which would be quite overwhelming. Anyway, I'm going to talk about all of these in a bit more detail, and throughout while I'm talking about things, I'll refer to them. So if you can just remember the blue guide, Thinking Ahead, that's for families. I'm Thinking Ahead is easy read, and then there's a Shaping My Future is a guide for people with physical disabilities. Okay. So this is Thinking Ahead, a planning guide for families. So this is just an image really of the 9 sections that's in Thinking Ahead. And they can be used in any order. They're all available to separately download, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's over 100 pages. It's quite, you know, big document even to look at. So, you know, you can just start with a section that seems useful to you. I'm going to talk about some of these today. As I go through. One of the things there is, the one up at the top, the image up at the top, making plan for the future, that's sort of almost a checklist. Families have been using that as a checklist to think about what they need to know. So it's almost like an index, I think. It tells you what's in the guide. They're asking questions about, do you need to do this? But they're all topics that are in the guide. Okay. So I'm Thinking Ahead. That's, as I said, it's easy read, and it was really to help young people to help young people and have conversations. And I know not everyone can use it. It's in one format, it's easy read. Not everyone likes easy read, but actually what it gives parents and other family carers is an idea of questions to be thinking about. So even if you feel your son or daughter couldn't answer the questions, it helps you to think, oh, this is what we need to think about, how can we go about this? So you just have to adapt it, really, the ideas in it for your family. And sometimes it, you know, if people really would find the communication around it difficult, then you know, they're questions for, you know, people who know the person well to sit and think about and pull that information together. And then it's very valid information that can really be used to you know, make your case for what you think would work for your relative. So this in the original document, I'm Thinking Ahead, there were 3 sections: how to plan, how to make choices, how to be part of the how to get the right housing and support. And then a few years ago, I did how to be part of the world of work, which is actually has some relevance to housing. So I will touch a bit on that as well. So again, all available to download separately as sections. Okay. Then there's Shaping My Future. So I said that's written for physically disabled people in Essex. But those are the 6 topics in there. And again, I'll touch on some of those that are relevant to what we're talking about today. But if any of those, the topics look interesting, just dip into it. I mean, some of the links are to Essex services, but there's a lot more things about rights in this document than there is in Thinking Ahead. There's a bit of an explanation of the Care Act that came in a bit after Thinking Ahead was written, but I amended it and added a bit in about the Care Act. But it's not so strong on that. But there's a lot more about reasonable adjustments, like thinking about learning and working, about health, getting the right health care. So I think there's some, you know, I'd really like to pull some of these things out and make sure families who have a, you know, relative with learning disabilities sort of have access to that information. Okay. So one of the things I think that's nice about the guides is, you can just print them, you can download them, you can print them, you can read them, but you can, if you save them as a document, you can then, they've all got fillable text boxes where there's questions and there's sort of, you know, you can gather information. And it's true in all of them. I'm Thinking Ahead particularly is mostly templates. So where there's this blue square, that means it's a fillable text box and you can write things. One of the things I think is really important is gathering, I do say evidence, you know, I think it's gathering evidence about why you're saying what you're saying. Because I sometimes think, you know, families' voices don't always get listened to. And actually, I think if you've shown that you've had conversation with your son or daughter, your relative, if you've talked to other people who know them, or they filled some information, and then you've got an overall picture, and it just makes your case, I think, stronger. And, you know, maybe that shouldn't be the case, but I think families have found that sometimes. Someone's just having this structure of what they don't feel at a meeting, they're just saying something. They feel, here's a document and I'm going to share this with you. And it's, you know, you've got something in your hands that you can, you know, base the conversation around and go back to. It helps to keep the conversation on the track that you want. But yeah, so I think these fillable text boxes are really useful. I mean, you can do it by hand. You could print it and write in the boxes. So you can do either. It's just, it's easier to share if you've done it as a document, you know, electronic document. Okay, electronic. Okay, so one of the things I've really learned from Thinking Ahead is how much these guides can bring conversations together. And sometimes I keep hearing about, you know, that say a college talks to a young person, but they don't talk to a family member about it, or families and the young person are talking, but maybe other people don't know the conversation. So it's really what I was saying about getting stuff written down and sharing it, so people are on the same page, people understand where you're coming from, where your young person is coming from, and why you're saying the things you are. So I've done lots of work in Essex, and you know, I've trained their social workers and some of their schools and colleges and different services really to use the guides, and it's really meant they're going out with it to families, and you know, families as maybe they already know about it and things like that, but they're using the same document. People are using I'm Thinking Ahead to do assessments. So the housing section, they sometimes use, some social workers are using that to do the housing assessment. So that's another option. You know, if you're feeling, you know, you could be asking someone, could you use this with my young person? Because, you know, see what you find out if you're feeling that there needs to be more of a conversation. So that's just another thought about using the guides. Okay, so we're going to start then talking about planning more broadly before focusing on a place to live. So, I mean, I think all of Thinking Ahead and I'm Thinking Ahead has got uses in relation to this, but I'm going to focus on planning in a person-centered way, making decisions, making choices, and building friendships and support networks. And I'll just go through those and some of the resources that you could use. Okay, so this is the section from Thinking Ahead and my guide. And person-centered planning actually underpins all our guides. And I'm sure you all know it starts with thinking about the person, who they are, and what they want from life, and not what services are available. It goes back to what I was saying right at the start. And I think person-centered planning probably got talked about a lot more, maybe 15 years ago. There was a real push from government around person-centered planning. It just feels it's slightly disappeared off the agenda. I think it's slightly undermined sort of term now. And people talk about person-centered planning, and it's probably a bit sort of superficial. It's not really involving people properly in the conversations, maybe. Anyway, there's a description of it in Thinking Ahead. It's not, you know, detailed or anything like that, but these are the templates that are in Thinking Ahead. What do we like and admire? What makes a good day, bad day? Looking at who are important people in a person's life, and what are your hopes and wishes for the future? And it has a bit of an explanation about how to use all of those. Okay, so I actually think, you know, that it gives you a bit of an introduction in Thinking Ahead, but I actually really use I'm Thinking Ahead now around the person-centered planning with families. And actually, Marie and I looked at this template. So I think the main one really is thinking about people having a good life and keeping safe and well. And it's a person-centered planning tool that's been around for a long time, but often it's like what's important to a person, what's important for a person. I've just put it in this format for this guide. And I think often what people need to have a good life gets, I would say, doesn't get the priority it needs. Sometimes the focus is on keeping safe and well. I mean, with services, you know, obviously they have a duty to keep people safe and well. And sometimes, you know, families can feel like, oh, we can't ask for things that we know are really important for our young person to sort of get the most from life, to enjoy life. But going back to what Sally was saying about the Care Act, the Care Act does talk about the principle of well-being, and that really fits with this idea of what do I need to have a good life. So they're really valid needs and things you want to happen in your young person's life. So I think it's really useful to maybe keep some of the priorities that are important to you and not kind of go into just the priorities of, I know keeping safe and well is important for everyone, but it's making sure that happens and it's balanced. I think often the image is balancing the two in life, not just having a big focus on keeping safe and well and not on having good life. And when resources are short, people do, again, you know, the focus becomes a bit more keeping safe and well. So I think it's well worth that as a starting point. We might talk about that a bit later, because I think, you know, Marie, we had an interesting conversation about it, didn't we, when you heard me talking about it before. So, okay, next slide. Oh, actually, I'm just going to say, I thought afterwards I haven't put the slide in about shaping my future in relation to planning. I think if you look at Shaping My Future, although it's not an easy read, it's got a really more detailed, and they've got more tools for planning and an explanation about why you might use them. I kind of like where I've got to with that. It's kind of definitely a step on from the Thinking Ahead introduction. So definitely, if you want to explore planning, you know, have a look at Shaping My Future, the first section, and it explains each tool, why you might use it, in what situation you might use it, and what it does, how it works. So yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the slide in, but I realised after I'd sent them off I hadn't done that. Okay, so another section in Thinking Ahead, which again was touched on earlier, is about the whole thing about becoming 18 or 16 and the Mental Capacity Act. So I think Thinking Ahead has got quite a good introduction to making decisions as adults, and to the Mental Capacity Act. Explains it in a family sort of friendly way. And yeah, explains families' rights when decisions are being made. So again, it's a good introduction. It has links to other family-friendly resources around decision making, the Mental Capacity Act. I mean, that's a topic in itself, so that's all I'm going to say. And then next slide. So I think another really good place to start is I'm thinking ahead of how to make choices. And I think people are really faced, especially, you know, young people, 16 to 25, with being asked really huge choices and sometimes not really having had much time at school or college really to think about how they make choices, what helps them to make choices, what is a choice. I mean, I might be wrong, but I have met people where it feels like, you know, they're being asked to take on big questions. So it's really like just helping families think, how can we do more about choices with our young person? So it has a section about what choices do you make in your life, and then thinking, what other choices would you like to make about that? So just the more people get confident about making small choices, the better prepared they are for making big choices about, what do I do when I leave college? What do I do about, do I want to leave home? Do I want to get a job? It looks at who helps people to make choices. And again, I think some people are much more skilled at this, and different ways of choice making. Different people have different skills around it, and it's finding people, what are the skills that actually really helps your young person to make choices, and that'll be different for everyone. And it's, yeah, I really think the more we can give people confidence about and skills and confidence about making choices, actually the safer they are in adulthood. That they're going to make, you know, better decisions, but they're also going to feel safer. They're going to feel they can speak up and people will listen. So I think anything around this is so useful for young adults. Okay. So the other section I thought was useful to talk about was about friendships and community connections and what they bring. Again, this is a huge topic. It's a couple of hours worth of talking about it, but I've just put some ideas down there. And again, I think sometimes friendships, community connections gets a bit lost in assessments and what gets funded. And I think they're just really, really, really important. I've just put, I'm not going to go through all those, but you know, I think people do often experience a lot of loneliness and anxiety and things, and friendships are a real way of, and community connection. So, you know, friendships with peers, but also being connected with people in your community, being part of things is really important. And I think that, you know, who do I want to share a home with? If you've explored friendships, then you're in a much better position to think about who you might want to live with. Thanks. So there is a section in Thinking Ahead. There isn't in I'm Thinking Ahead specifically, but what I did do, I've often wanted to write a section on friendship and community connections for I'm Thinking Ahead. But what I did was put quite a lot of it into how to be part of the world of work, because I think if people can be part of their local community and see how they connect with people, then that's a really good way of thinking about whether you want to work and what kind of work you might like and who might help you to make a step on the ladder or whatever. So one of the things, so you're probably familiar with that diagram up at the top about looking at who's in people's network. That's in Thinking Ahead. It's actually, I think it's also in Shaping My Future. One of the things that's in a sort of an appendix really at the back of how to be part of the world of work is some information about community mapping. And I think that's really useful in relation to housing. So to think, maybe map out, where are the places that your young person goes? Where are the places that are important to them? Where do they know people? Where are their family? Where are their friends? Where are their connections? And then that might help to think about an area where someone might be a good place to really be focusing, thinking about living, because actually there's naturally those support networks, and you don't really want somewhere to live that then adds complications about traveling to places or being, you know, ends up making people feel lonely because they're not really near the people. And people will say things that maybe you don't really expect when you do this planning with someone. They might talk about people you hadn't really realised were important. Similarly with the relationship map up at the top. Again, these are huge topics, so I'm kind of skimming the surface, but it's just to give you some thoughts. Maybe these are things to think about. Okay. I'm just going to have a sip of water. So moving on then to thinking about a place to live. So I'm going to talk about having conversations with your young person, and then just thinking about different ways housing's organised. So I'll just go through that quite quickly as well. Okay, so I'm thinking ahead. I think if you are thinking about, not in the next few years or whatever, it's never too early really to start talking about housing unless you think it's going to really, cause someone a lot of stress. But it's not about where do you want to go and live. It's not about what houses are available or what kind of places are available. It's about what do you think about housing. So it's really helpful to give, some families have said this, a young person's got a much more realistic sense of what moving home might mean, and also some of the steps, some of the things they can think about, how they can shape that, and how you get a sense of what's important to someone about moving home. So it's done as 3 big questions. Who do you want to live with? Where do you want to live? And what help would you need? And I know people often say to me, it sort of raises expectations. I actually don't think it. I mean, it might do, but we all have kind of raised expectations often about things. But actually, what it does is make it more real. And it's not about saying just because you say who you want to live with or whatever that's going to happen. But actually, you'll get nearer to it if you've asked these questions. So I always feel this idea of raising expectations. I suppose I've never felt comfortable with it. I think people should have expectations, and none of us get exactly what we want, but we know what we want from where we're going to live, and then we try and get as near as possible. We have to compromise in the end, but I think that can all be explained to someone. I think the guide actually says that, just start thinking about this early. You won't be able to get everything you want, but the sooner you start to think about it, the more likely you are for things to work. So then the big question of question 2, where do you want to live? That's divided up into 3 smaller questions. It's a little bit goes round, but so what does the house or the flat need to be like? Who do I want to live near? And what do I want to live near? So that goes back to your friends, your family, your connections. To your, 2 of those questions are really based on that same idea about that. Can, if you've done some of that thinking, that can really help someone to think about those questions. Okay. So these are just some of the templates in there. So as you can see, they're just like yes, no, maybe. In a way, the answer is not so important, except someone might say an emphatic yes, an emphatic no, or they'd say maybe and they're just not bothered. And, maybe someone will say something different another time. That's fine as well. That's all just part of the conversation and the learning. People will go away and think and then think, actually, I said that was really, definitely don't want that. But, oh, maybe I do now. I've had a chance to think about it. So those are just some of the questions. I think it's, sometimes the recording will be important of those answers. I think the main thing is really the conversation and the exploration of what is housing, what are the sort of things to think about. Okay. So this is Thinking Ahead Housing and Support, the section on housing support, section 6. So the main thing this has really got is options that may currently be available in your local area, and then options for arranging something new. This was written at a time, I think, when housing was slightly different, and I think we were all a bit more optimistic about housing. I think housing has changed a bit, and in a way, I don't know, sometimes it feels like, maybe options for arranging something new feels harder, I don't know. And it's got, family investment, inheriting family home and succession and tenancy. So there's other bits of information in there as well. Okay. So options that may currently exist. There's a shared house, shared lives, which I know is being talked about later on, residential care, core and cluster, intentional community and network. So they may currently exist. They don't exist in every area, but they, in a way, again, you've got a bit of a framework. Actually, you might just think there's something there that I think it pops out at me. I think it makes a bit of sense to explore that, and I want to ask some questions about it and find out what the possibility is. So that little box says, what the term means, how will the support be organised, things to consider, and then some links to explore it further. So it's just a bit of an overview, a bit of an introduction. Okay. And then this is options for arranging something new. And I think this is something maybe people don't think about so much, but obviously people can, rent privately, or, people can rent a house together privately. none of these things are without difficulties. You know, housing, I didn't say, but I think housing has become much more complex, housing and support much more complex, and is, you know, it's quite a big thing to get your head around, really. So there's shared or outright ownership, and that includes hold mortgages, which people might have come across. Private sector leasing, some kind of charity organisations lease housing on behalf of people, and then they manage the housing. And then again, family investment, including inheriting a family home. So I'm not going to go into all that detail. It's a huge topic, but it just gives you a sense. If you want to go and have a bit of a read, that's a starting point. Okay. So I've just put a slide in here about what is supported living, because I think there's so much confusion about this, and it is the road I think most people go down, and it is the road that probably services, statutory services, you know, assessment will talk about. I think it's just important to know a few things, and this is more for reference, but there is no legal definition of supported living, unlike, say, residential care. But it describes an arrangement where someone owns or rents their home and support's provided by a different organisation. In practice, that often is two arms of the same organisation. One provides the accommodation, one provides the support. Not always, sometimes they are separate, but some organisations are doing both. But I think people often think supported living is not for their young person because they think it's very independent living. It's, I mean, it can be any level of support. And I know a house well somewhere where 4 young people with very complex disabilities went from college and they moved in together. They all have 24-hour support. They all have one-to-one support. So it can be the support can be what needs to be, and there can be core hours for the house and then one-to-one support for individuals, or you know, people might just get individual support, or there might just be core hours for the house. So again, all sorts of different arrangements. One of the things is there's just much more control with supported living than, say, residential care, for example, over people having money and things like that, having choice, basically having choice and control. So I just also thought a lot of families don't know about the REACH standards. Again, if you're kind of really getting down the road, thinking about housing, really good thing to go and look at. The REACH standards are all about supported living, about people having choice and control. And there's a link to find out more about that guide there. Thinking Ahead also has a section keeping an eye on things, because when I talked to families, I realised that families were really concerned about the quality of support. So this is basically what that is. But there is a checklist about choosing a support provider, which could be anything, support for anything. But you know, you could use it around an organisation that would be providing the support bit of the housing. So if you're going to look at places, if someone says, oh, this, you know, you could go and look at the X, Y, Z, whatever, quite a good checklist to take. I mean, things like, it's asking, like, ask questions, what do they know about person sector planning? Just find out, you know, is it a national organisation? Is it a local organisation? What's their setup? How are they managed? You know, how do they do various things? So you just go a bit, rather than just going and like a bit of a blank canvas looking at somewhere. Okay. So this is Shaping My Future, the guide for physically disabled people, about my home. And I think there's lots of things in here. It's more up to date. If your relative also has a physical disability, then you're also thinking, you know, how does that, you know, it's more complex around housing because you're looking at accessible housing. So it's got information about that. It's also got, I think, useful information about equipment and adaptations. And I think when I was writing this, I think I became really aware that maybe in the learning disability world, we don't think as much as we could about using equipment and adaptations, you know, to improve people's quality of life. So there's information in there. Obviously, some of this is linked to Essex, but it gives you an idea. Obviously, your son or daughter might have a physical disability. So yeah, you know, it's actually the same sort of format, like what description, pros and cons, really. So it's the same thing. It's got more up-to-date information about some of those topics. So again, I think it's, you know, if you're really looking at this, I'd download this and use this as another sort of reference document and just see what bits in it are useful to you. Okay. So I've just put a few tips from families. So the first one, don't start by asking your local authority what's available. Start with conversations with your relative. Find out what they are thinking. Well, from what I've said, you'll know that. I think that, you know, it's makes a lot of sense. It saves your time, to be honest. It saves everyone's time if you've had those conversations and you're going in with the right kind of the path you want to take. You already know that, and you maybe think some things. I think we're going to park that. You can always have an open mind and go back and say, oh no, I can see that might be useful. But families just always say this idea of writing down the ideas and information you gather it's made families come out of dead ends they're feeling in, or arguments they feel they're stuck in, with services about what they think would be good. And just on a more positive side of that is just getting better options, just because you pin things down a bit more, and just keep going back to it. Don't gather information ideas as one-off. This is a lifetime approach. I think a lifetime approach, and I think families who've got into this just say, they just go on planning and using information, gathering more information, thinking, oh, what next? Have a bit of a breather, then okay, what are we going to think about next? And I think the last point, it's you can really feel like we've got to get this right, and obviously you do want to get it right, but people do move, and I think sometimes, if we think about other young people, we know they move into houses, it doesn't work, and they need to, they don't get on with the people, or it's not in the right place. They move on, and that isn't a failure. That's fine, and I think that's quite helpful to have that approach. People's lives do change. None of us probably live where we lived. Depends on your age, but where you were 20 years ago. So it just, you want something to work for a realistic length of time, but your young person will grow into an adult, they'll want different things from life, maybe develop different interests, different skills, something else will be right. Okay, so again, a resource, this is a Together Matters resource on the website to download, and again, families have really found this helpful in focusing their minds. So one of the things, how to support people with learning disabilities under autism take part in their annual review, that was really written, it was really written with adult social care reviews in mind, but people have used it for other, for young people as well. And it's just really thinking for people who find meetings really difficult, or don't use words, will find it very difficult to communicate what they want. So it's about kind of how can they be involved in their views and their ideas being heard, even though they're not at the meeting. And then the template for the annual review is like, again, thinking about what's working well and what could be better. So it's divided into topics. One of those is housing, but all sorts of other things. And there are other things you might think, well, we need to sort out the friendships and the connections before we think about the housing. So it helps you think, well, what are the things and what order do we want to try and address some of these things? That, again, it's really helped families where they feel like a bit in conflict. And I don't obviously think everyone's in conflict all the time, but sometimes that conflict can be very draining for families. So it just helps sometimes with that. And a guide that just came out this year, again, really, I think really comprehensive, and got lots of information that aren't in the things. Together, thinking ahead, I'm thinking ahead features in it, in that making your own housing plan. But there's lots of stuff about explaining how it all works. So paying for your home, paying for living costs, the sort of legal issues, things like that. There's information here that I think is just really useful and all kind of up to date with having just come out this year. And I think finally, it's just the links to Together Matters. So the thing, if you want to download stuff, you go to the resources and information page, and there's national and there's Essex. So really, more or less everything is on the national. But if you want to look at Shaping My Future, because it's an Essex guide, it's on the Essex page. So you just need you don't naturally think to go on the Essex page. But that's where you'll find Shaping My Future. I probably need to make I keep thinking I need to make a link on the national page to say, if you want to look at this, it's there. But yeah. If I've talked about something you think I didn't really quite catch what that's about or whatever, or would it be helpful to do this? I'm always really just, you know, there's my email address, just message me. Or if you've got thoughts, you know, if you think, oh, that would really fit with that, you know, again, really happy to hear from you. And I hope I haven't gone over my time.
No, you've done perfectly.
I did get a bit extra, didn't I? Because I started early.
You did. But no,
Sorry.
thank you.
I consumed that time. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all. That was super helpful. Thank you. And as Christine mentioned, we've been having some conversations about my daughter, and I've been using the guide to help me think about what we do post-education. And actually that section on what makes a good life has really, really helped, because all I was focusing on was the kind of physical stuff, and, you know, focusing on her physical health and her epilepsy and her feeding. And I wasn't actually thinking what was really important to her. So it's kind of reframed that for me, and it's made me think of other options. So definitely worth having a look through the guides and using bits and pieces, take bits out that are useful. But no, that was brilliant. Thank you, Christine.
Pleasure.
And so Sally's just going to run through the next few slides for us, just outlining some of the other options that are available.
Yes, thank you. So this diagram here just gives an overview of the main options. I think, Christine, your slide about thinking about new options, I thought was really helpful. This one is looking at what is currently, I suppose, available, and the 4 different aspects of that. I'm going to talk quite briefly about these. Please do look at the link on the bottom, on the left-hand side of the slide, which links to our housing page on our new website. So please do have a look at that, because it's got each of them in a lot more detail. So one of the options is that many adults with learning disabilities and/or autism live with their families and continue to live at home, and the council can offer support to make this work. The support can be provided in a variety of ways. It could be through day activities, short breaks, access to social clubs, and then some young people can then have a personal budget and get direct payments that can be used. Could be used quite creatively for things that will support them in what they need or what they want to do. So it could be that they're used to employ personal assistants, or maybe to meet their needs in other ways, and/or to pay for short breaks and respites. So one option is sort of living at home. Residential care. So residential care offers specialist services with high levels of staffing 24 hours a day, and it's for people who need high levels of direct support with their personal care and daily living. There's a link here to a directory of local services in Brighton and Hove in East Sussex. So it's current, so it's worth looking at. It's very big, so do be prepared to sort of filter down, but it would be useful if you're wanting to know more about that. Christine, I thought your slide about supported living was very, very helpful. So in our area, there are 2 main forms of supported living. There's living in a group home where people have their own room but share facilities. And there's living in a self-contained flat or studio. Now, for both of those, support may vary widely depending on the young person's needs. So it could be, as Christine said, from 24 hours staffing, or it could be just a few hours a day. And if you have a look here, some information and the contact details, if you want to know more about that. We also, on our Amaze website, which I'm plugging, I'm afraid, quite a bit, but there is also a link to where you can look at details of supported living in our area. So you click on it and then you can put your postcode and see what's available locally. So if you'd like to look more into that, do have a look at our website. And then shared lives. which I understand Saffron is going to talk more about, but that's another option that's available.
Lovely, thank you, Sally. So with that, yeah, can we pass over to you, Saffron, so you can talk to us about Shared Lives?
Sorry, it's having a little bit of trouble unmuting there, but I'm unmuted now. So first of all, just to say, I haven't got any slides. I'm just going to speak to you, so I hope that's okay. So I'm Saffron Romero, and I'm the registered manager for East Sussex County Council Shared Lives. I've been in that position for 2.5 years, and prior to that, I worked for the East Sussex Community Learning Disability team as a social worker. Prior to that, when studying to be a social worker, I did my first placement in Shared Lives. I love working for Shared Lives, and I have seen throughout my career some just wonderful journeys for people who've come into Shared Lives, remain in Shared Lives. Some people move on from it. And just overall, I just think it's just a really positive service which works incredibly well for many, many people. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with Shared Lives and some of you less so. So today's just really a bit of an overview, and then I understand that we've got some questions at the end. So if there's anything further that you want to ask, really welcome any further questions. What I'm going to cover today really is just a little bit of context. What is Shared Lives? Very brief history. How we fit into East Sussex County Council Adult Social Care. I'll also talk a little bit about eligibility, why someone might come into Shared Lives, give you a little bit of detail about the service as well, and then just a little bit about outcomes as well. So in terms of what it is, as the name suggests, it's really about sharing a life. The care and accommodation takes place in family homes. When we talk about family, we talk about the broadest sense of family. It could be a single person. It could be a single person with a couple of kids. It could be a married couple. It really is just like the sort of kind of broad sense of what a family is. And our Shared Lives providers come from a real range of backgrounds. We've got paramedics, we've got ICU nurses, we've got people who worked in the care sector previously. I think we've got a bus driver. It's really, really varied, but it's people who, for whatever reason, have decided that they feel that they want to open up their homes, and they feel that they've got something to offer. So within Shared Lives, you can have up to 3 adults living within Shared Lives. So we have a number of households that do have 3 people. Some, it's the preference of the providers to only have 2 or 1. It really, really depends. So Shared Lives providers can either offer permanent homes, or they can also offer respite. So we do a real mix of the two. All of our Shared Lives providers are trained, and they're supported and monitored by our service to provide care and support to individuals. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In terms of history, it's been around a long time. I think it used to be known as adult placement, and then it changed to Shared Lives, but it had been going around for about 40 years. And then over the past 5 years, they've grown by about 30%. They're national, so pretty much anywhere in the country, you've got Shared Lives schemes. The majority of them are operated under local authorities, but there's also charities and not-for-profit organisations who also run Shared Lives. But it's a largely similar model for all services. So nationally, there's around 9,000 Shared Lives providers who provide full-time support to around 5,000 people. And then there's another 5,000 who either do visit for the day. Some Shared Lives services do daycare. And then also people go for respite, and that can be rolling respite. So in terms of how we fit into adult social care, we sit under a department called Learning Disability Directly Provided Services. So we've got a number of services there. We've got something called Grangemead, which is emergency respite. We've got Greenwood, which is rolling respite. We've got a number of day services. I'm sure you'll have heard of some of them, Beeching Park and Linden Court. We've also got supported living as well, and we've also got supported accommodation, so quite a range. In terms of the Shared Lives team, up the chain of command, we basically report directly to Mark Staton, who's the Director of Adult Social Care. And then sitting underneath me, I have a wonderful team of Shared Lives officers. So I have 8 Shared Lives officers. I also have a senior Shared Lives officer, and we also have an admin team to support all the work that we do. And our primary role is to oversee the placements. We make sure that our Shared Lives providers are supported to deliver the care which is being commissioned. And we also make sure that we're complying to the standards of the Care Quality Commission regulatory framework. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So it's already been touched on, but eligibility. So a person needs to have been assessed by the appropriate care management team as having eligible needs under the Care Act. And that's before a referral can be made to Shared Lives. So Shared Lives, more often than not, a person is likely to need support with personal care and medication. And they need a provider who is able to provide, has 24-hour responsibility for the person living with them. So as I've mentioned before, Shared Lives is regulated by the Care Quality Commission, and that enables us to provide personal care, which is hands-on, and also to provide medication administration, which is not just about prompting. It would actually be about the administering. So that's not to say that everybody in Shared Lives needs that, but it being regulated by CQC means that we can provide that. So just thinking a little bit about risk, sometimes it's just important to talk about that. We've got quite a low tolerance for risk in Shared Lives, and that's for obvious reasons, is because its support is provided in a family home. You know, we've got children there, not always, you know, we've got pets, it's a domestic setting, so we don't operate really high sort of risk placements, which, you know, can potentially be facilitated in other settings. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to a little bit more detail about the service. I think just to be clear, this is in relation to Shared Lives East Sussex. So the Shared Lives officer role is to oversee providers. So we supervise and support the Shared Lives providers. So make sure that we're going into the homes, we're making sure that the people who are being supported in the way that is agreed on their support plans. We're offering advice and guidance for situations which can crop up. And we make sure that we do a minimum of 12 weekly support visits. But in all honesty, there's a lot more contact between our Shared Lives officers and the placements than that, because things are always cropping up. And, you know, we're always there to support and offer guidance. We also make sure that our providers are trained. They go through induction training, they go through Mental Capacity Act training, they go through safeguarding training, medication, and we also support them with their personal development. We also do a 3-yearly reapproval of our providers. So we make sure that their DBSs are up to date, and we also make sure that they're providing care in the way that we want them to do that. And if there's any issues that we need to address, we make sure any of those factors are addressed before we reapprove. The assessment process for Shared Lives providers is very lengthy. It takes between 6 and 8 months. We do a really, really in-depth assessment. We find out about their values, why they want to do this. We look at their support networks. We look at their skills. We're trusting our providers to provide homes for some of the most vulnerable people in society. And it's really, really important for us to make sure that those people are the right people to provide that care and support. So in terms of the people potentially coming into our placement, they're referred to us through what's known as a specialist placement team brokerage. And what we will do is that we will then allocate a shared lives officer to that person, and we do our own assessment. And we make sure that that assessment is really person-centered. And a lot of the things that were being talked about there about how to connect people to their communities, making friends, what's important to them, what is it that they want to achieve, that's all very, very much part of our assessment process. We work directly with the person who's been referred in. And very often the families are also involved in that, and we'd be having conversations to make sure that that assessment gave a really good reflection of who that person was. So each of our providers has what's known as a matching profile. So it's a little bit, I don't know, a bit like a maybe dating website, or you know, when you get the particulars of when you're buying a house. So there'll be a photograph of the property, the rooms, the family. It will talk about who they are, what their interests in, what they can offer, and we share that with the person who's being assessed and with their family. They can have a look at that and think, oh, you know, we quite like to meet them. So we do things like an initial visit. You go around, people have a cup of tea, just get to know each other. Then they might go for a tea visit, then they might go and stay overnight. So it's really about that very gentle matching and trying to find out, is the person going to get on with the shared lives provider? Are they going to get on with the other people who live in the household? You know, it's a really kind of holistic process that we go through. Once we've got somebody placed, we then continue to monitor and have oversight of the placement. The care teams retain case responsibility for the person who's been placed, but we're very, very involved in that, you know, that sort of oversight, supporting people with what they want to do. We hold an annual review. We also have, once they've moved in, we do a 12-week review just to see how things are going. We have very client-focused feedback forms so that the person who's been placed can give us their views on how they think things are going, if there's anything that they need to change. So it's kind of like an ongoing process, really. So just to give you a little bit of detail about the actual statistics for the service as of just now, we've just updated these. We've got 114 shared lives providers in East Sussex. So that's 76 households. We've got 34 households in Hastings, 15 in Bexhill, 14 in Wealdon, 7 in Eastbourne, and 6 in Lewis and the Havens. We've got 14 providers providing rolling respite, and then we've got 99 permanent people living with our providers. Where we draw our, the people who live with us from, we've got 32 people who have come from the neighbourhood support teams. We've got 11 people who've come from the mental health teams, and we've got 56 people who've come from the learning disability team. So you can see that the largest proportion of people who come to live with us are people with a learning disability. In terms of age groups, just this particular age group I just sort of picked up on, it's 18 to 24. We've got 15 people living with us, and between 25 and 64 at the moment, we've got 80 people living with us. So in terms of outcomes, CQC continues to rate shared lives as being one of the highest forms of quality care in England, with 97% of schemes being rated good or outstanding. As I mentioned before, we do feedback forms with the people who live with us, and they report really high levels of satisfaction with placements, which is, you know, really, really good for us to hear. We have got people who've lived in shared lives for 20, 25, 30 years with the same family. We've got people who live in shared lives who've moved around shared lives families. So perhaps they've been to, you know, 3 or 4. It doesn't always work, and that's okay. You know, for many reasons things don't work, but we'd always try to support people to look at other options. And it might be that they stay with us in shared lives, but they go to a different family, or it might be that shared lives isn't right for them and they might move on to something like supported living. It's very, very much about person-centered care. We really look at life skills. So we're looking at things like cooking, money management. We support people to get into employment. We maintain good relationships with people's families. We've got one person who's been living with us for, I think, 9 years, came as a very kind of, shy and unconfident young man. He is just moved on from shared lives. He's moving in with his girlfriend. He's about to have a baby and he's got a full-time job. And it's wonderful to see. And as going back to what I said about it being transformational, aspirational, I've seen it time and time again. And when we get the matches right, I think shared lives is a really, really good option for people. Well, we are getting a new web page, and we have just done a really lovely video. One of our providers, who's been a shared lives provider for many years, she's got 3 people living with her, and she's a wonderful provider, and she invited the camera crews into her house. And we did that because it can be hard for people sometimes to completely be able to conceptualize what shared lives is. Unfortunately, it's not quite ready. But when it is ready, I can certainly share that so that you can get a bit of an insight, a bit of a window into what shared lives looks like. We've also got some links for information, and we are going to have a web page. So I'm really happy to share that so that you can follow up and finding out a bit more information about it as part of your preparation for the next stages. So that's everything for me, but I'm very happy to answer questions later on.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Saffron. And yeah, once that website and video, once they're all done, if you send that to me, then I can send it out to everybody here today.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've noticed in the chat there's a few questions, so we'll do those at the end. Let's me just move this up, move the slides on. So here are just the contacts for shared lives in East Sussex and for Brighton and Hove. And again, you'll get these slides, so don't worry about jotting the links down. We're going to move on now to Kelly, who's one of our befrienders in Brighton and Hove, and she's going to talk a little bit today about her daughter Daisy and the transition from being at home with a personal budget and moving into supported living. So is it all right if we move on to you, Kelly?
Yeah, of course it is. I've hidden my face because I can't talk, and so I've hidden it.
That's fine, that's fine.
Hi everyone. So my daughter Daisy is 19 and she moved into supported living 8 months ago. She has autism, epilepsy, profound learning disabilities. She's noisy, she's non-verbal, she's got extreme self-injurious behaviour, which puts her in hospital quite a lot. Yeah, she's quite a pest, but she's gorgeous. So it was always the plan for her to move into to live independently as such. So from the age of 7, we had direct payments and they worked really, really well. And we did have quite a big package, and she used to go for like overnights 2 times a month. And we had a lot of help in the 3 times a week in the week for her, and that worked really good. In all the reviews, like EHCP meetings and stuff like that, I always said, when they asked what do you want for Daisy when she's an adult, blah blah blah, I always said, to live independently. So the local authority knew that was sort of the plan. But saying that, I did call them quite a lot in the November before her birthday. So her birthday, she was 18 in the March, just to jig their memory and get a move on. And we had a transition social worker that come round, and she allocated us like a broker. So that's sort of what I could explain it to. It's actually a CLDT worker. I don't know what it stands for. And she was our go-to. So she asked because Daisy can't talk, what Daisy's like, what she likes doing, what we would like for her. And then Daisy went on like a spine. So other care providers look at her and pick it up. So if they like the look of her, they'll like contact you. And we did have a lot of interest, which surprised me. So we had a lot of phone calls from different care providers. We went and looked at quite a few, and there was more about than I thought there was, because obviously you've got to be realistic. There isn't a lot around. And after looking at some, I decided, I was looking at residentials. I decided that isn't what I want for Daisy, because a lot of the doors were like front doors and she wouldn't be able to do that. It was just things like that. The kitchen cupboards were locked, and I wanted her to live in a house like ours, so she could just, it'd be like home from home. So we started looking into supported living, and the broker lady, she said to us, we can look as well. So I started getting on the case, and I started looking at different providers, and I found one in Epsom, Surrey. And I went and had a look at the house, and it was exactly what I wanted. And so we had a bit of because it was out of area, they ended up getting a contract with them so that they could fund it. We had to prove the other ones that we looked at weren't suitable for Daisy, for them to say the supported living house was okay, which they did. And yeah, so we're all ready for the move. Daisy went up there twice to visit, and then she moved out last August. And we all decided, they sort of said, it's better if you just leave her here, sort of thing, so she knows it's her home. She knows she's not going back home yet, and she can settle. So we dropped her off, and we left her there for 2 weeks, and that was horrendous. I think I cried every day till I went to bed for 2 weeks. But they kept in contact with us. They sent us loads of pictures. They text every day, and she was doing brilliantly. Then we went and visited her and took her out, and she looked amazing. So in 2 weeks, she'd stopped all the picking, all the biting, everything. She was calm, happy. She hadn't smiled in about 2 years. She's smiling. The transformation, I couldn't believe it. And then I sort of realised I'd done the right thing, because she'd been such hard work for so many years, and it was always just me and my husband. And I suppose, what 18-year-old wants to hang around with their mum and dad all the time, you know? So I think we definitely did the right thing, without a doubt, because I had so much guilt, and I went through every emotion going. So the house she lives in is just a normal house. She lives with 2 other girls that are, so Daisy's 19, one of them's 21 and one of them's 20. One of them's similar to Daisy, and the other one's a little bit more able. They can move freely around the house. If she wants to go and get something out the fridge, or get everything out the fridge like she does, chucks it on the floor, she's allowed. They've got a big play area in the garden. They've got a jacuzzi. They've got a recreational centre, which is up the road, with an outdoor swimming pool. She accesses the community loads. She's going to Nando's. She's going to pubs. She's doing stuff that she didn't hardly do here. You know, it's definitely, it's amazing, to be quite honest with you. And I can't think of anything else to say, but yeah, you know, it's definitely, it's changed our relationship as well, you know. So on a Saturday, we go and see her on a Saturday. Sometimes I go in the week, because I can go whenever I want. But I'm enjoying, obviously, my own time. You know, I've not been able to watch Netflix and chill. I've not been able to hardly read a book. So I'm doing all these things, and I've put on about a stone, but because I've not been running around so much, but it's brilliant. I've been away. I've spent loads of time with my other children. So it's been really life-changing, but for both of us. So when we go and see her, it's brilliant, and we have a great time. It's not a chore. We're all around London every weekend. We're going to Camden. She loves it. yeah, it's amazing. And to be quite honest, I wish I'd done it a little bit sooner, because the last 2 years were really not good. You know, she didn't like college. She didn't like being up indoors. It was awful. But yeah, it's definitely the best thing. Yeah, it's fantastic. And she's happy, and it's just brilliant. That's it.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. It's lovely to hear how well Daisy's doing and the impact that this is having on both you and her and your wider family. So
Yeah.
really lovely to hear such a positive story, and thank you for sharing. I know even for me, you know, my daughter's coming up for 19 and it's scary. It's really scary. So thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So if we just move on, we're right near the end, so we'll go into some Q&A soon. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a follow-up session on Zoom for anybody who'd like to come along. We wanted to do it next week, but apparently it's half term, which seems to have come around really, really quickly. So we're going to do a session on Friday the 7th of June from 12:30 to 1:30. You'll be sent this Zoom link, obviously, with the slides. And it's just that we appreciate today's been really information heavy, and sometimes it's just nice to chat with other parents and just share ideas and just spend some time chatting. So you're all welcome to join that if you're able to. And then just a couple of other things that the parent groups and befriending service offer, which you might find useful. So we have a new WhatsApp group, which is for parent carers who have young people in supported living or who are considering supported living or residential. It's a nice little group where, again, you can just share ideas with other people in a similar situation. In Brighton and Hove and in East Sussex, we have our Parents Like Us groups, and these are for parents who have young people aged 16 to 25. So we do in-person group meetups, and we also have WhatsApp groups, again, because the things, the challenges and the things that we're dealing with when our kids are that bit older are really different, and it's nice sometimes to talk with others who are in that same situation. And just to mention, in East Sussex, our Parents Like Us group is meeting up tomorrow, actually, in Eastbourne. So if anybody is free and wants to come along and just have a cup of tea, a bit of cake and a chat with some other parents, you'd be more than welcome to. Zoe's running that session for us, and her contact details are there. And then just finally, just to say thank you so much to all our speakers today. You've all been wonderful. Like we said at the beginning, it's such an emotive subject. So it's really wonderful to hear from different organisations and just to find some more information.